such an asshole.
All right, we have an interesting question. Hey, Aaron, I always thought the accredited investor status was bullshit to keep most gains for the already wealthy. Is this true, or are there good reasons for this to exist? Cheers, Jeremy, aka Stan the Milkman. So I kind of looked into it, and it depends on which country you're in, and I don't want to mention where you're from because it keep you relatively anonymous. But what an accredited investor is either an individual or an entity. And by entity, it could be a private company, like an investment firm, like a mutual fund. It could be a nonprofit. They even listed like Indian tribes because they have a sovereign wealth fund effectively. Any entity or individual that has a large amount of money, pensions, they can qualify to become an accredited investor. And the reason that they want to delineate between an accredited investor and an unaccredited or non-accredited investor, and it boils down to this, is because Americans and Westerners in general are stupid. And Americans and Westerners in general don't want to have any responsibility for their own stupid decisions. And on top of that, most of your financiers, whether that's Wall Street or what's it, Downey? What is it over in the United Kingdom? Your Wall Street, whatever is in Toronto. Most finance people are scumbags, and they will steal and from their fellow man. And so what has ended up happening is your financial regulatory agencies, regardless of what country you're in, has basically said, okay, there are publicly traded investments you can make, stocks, mutual funds, things like that. And they meet all these compliance and reporting requirements. In our case, the SEC requires you to do. And then you could sell your shares to the public. So it means going public. Those shares are now available to mom and pa on the street. And they've basically been sanitized, approved, kind of like the FDA approves food or drugs. It's kind of like the SEC approves. All right, they met our reporting requirements. All right, so here's that. But then there's oftentimes that either because of the size of the deal, it's not that big and somebody doesn't need that much money. Privacy concerns, people don't want to know who's being invested. You don't want to disclose it. To go public, to have a public event, that takes a lot of legal and financial and compliance costs to meet the SEC requirements. And then what else? And then sometimes it's just a shoddy investment, just a crappy investment. There are non-public investments or private placements, right? And by law, if you're not an accredited investor, you can invest in these, or more likely, the person selling this investment cannot sell it to anyone who's not an accredited investor. And if they find out you did that, then you go to jail. Now, naturally, because finance people are scum, they try and find ways around, like, hey, you want to get in on an IPO, private equity. And what they do is they go find suckers to go and like, I got a fund and you could get in and get yourself a share. And those really work. But yeah, it's basically to prevent people who are too damn lazy to do their own research and don't want to take responsibility. And the government doesn't want to, like, look, you're screwing. And to be fair, I know this may shock you people. Finance people screw people over. So the government came in and says, look, here's the public markets. All right. These public firms have made their financial statements public. They've met auditing and requirements there. So you can go trade in those, right? McDonald's or whatever else. But startups, small companies, or just private, there's large companies that are private who don't meet these requirements, or you don't want to meet these reporting requirements. You just like don't have the time and money to do it. You're just going to want to go raise your money. All right. Yeah. Mom and pa cannot invest it. You could only sell those investments to accredited investors. And so now there's good reason for it. You know, an IPO and to comply with SEC filing requirements is millions of dollars. Well, what if you're just some small company? You're a micro cap. You don't need, you're going to start a restaurant or whatever. Then you go off to a bank, bank gets your financial statements and does it there. But there's a market for financing that does not require an IPO. And you know what? Maybe you just don't want to dick around with your rank and file Main Street mom and pa investors. Maybe you need like a venture capitalist who's like very savvy with finance. Like, here's your money, go. Here's your money, go. make the money. We don't have time to, especially a fast moving, like when technology, there's a race going on, who can perfect whatever technology first. You don't want to be dealing with the SEC. So there's some legitimate markets for that. But basically, yeah, the accredited investor status, I think it's legitimate. I don't think it's bullshit. I think it's legitimate. Because otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of people getting screwed up. Then they go and flood the government, the judicial system with lawsuits. It's not good for the economy. And it's just, yeah, most people are too stupid and they don't want to take responsibility. And there's sharks out there that will steal money from them. Absolutely. Hell, you saw the .com thing and the housing crisis, even under the guise of a ton of federal regulation, you still had financiers coming in there and stealing to the tune of multiple trillions of dollars. I mean, it still happens. I mean, what happens when there is no federal oversight? So these accredited investors are either knowledgeable, they got the money, they have the liquidity, and they otherwise have the ability to accurately analyze and assess and research these investments. So not only are they not hoodwinked, but if they lose their money, they're not going to the government for a bailout or filing for bankruptcy. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, it's like a babysitter. It's like, okay, Americans, everything should be all perfect for you. Don't worry, don't think. No, we're going to make sure you can invest. And so I don't even think it's for protection. It's not to keep the little man out. I mean, if anything, rich people, wealthy people would like individual investors to come in to bid up their already made invested private investments. If for any other reason to offload it sometimes, if they have one that goes south, like, oh yeah, you want a private deal? Yeah, we'll sell you some shares. Look at this guy from wherever, Vermont. Yeah, so there you go. That's I think it is authentic and legitimate. All right, no comments. I don't think so. Boom, we're done. See you guys later.